Okay, what I want to cover with you now is what I would call trapping intentions. And I've got 5 things again listed here under trapping intentions of why we're going to go out and trap to begin with. Understanding that helps us to understand the rationale behind trapping if we've never trapped before or if for some reason we don't approve of trapping. So let's talk about these intentions. Food supplementation, number 1, all right? Back to the whole self-reliance thing. The same reason that people hunt deer, the same reason that people hunt squirrel, the same reason that people hunt rabbit is to supplement the food that they have to go out and purchase with food off the landscape. So that offsets that grocery bill or that expenditure of dollars that they had to earn by pulling food off the landscape. Just like gardening is a supplement to the food that you buy as far as produce at the market, trapping is a way to supplement a meat source so that you don't have to go buy as much meat. Well, that's number 1. And in that case, we're talking about trapping things like coons and possums because those are the 2 best eating animals really as far as what we normally trap. Now, possums have only been popularized as far as an eating animal in the northern part of the United States for a very short time. But in the South, possum has been a very popular food animal for a long period of time. The reason for that is because possums didn't used to occur north of the Mason-Dixon line until they started being encroached on by human presence and they started to move northward. And now possums are prevalent all over the United States for the most part, at least in non-desert areas. So we have a lot of possums in eastern woodlands in northern areas like Ohio, Indiana, northern Kentucky, places like that didn't used to have them. But they are a very good food source as well as raccoons. So it's a supplement to your food. Fur. In the old days, even in the 80s, you could trap animals and you could sell the fur to the fur market and you could supplement your income by doing that and then use the other parts of the animal for other things depending on what they were. Again, especially things like raccoon where you could actually eat the meat and it was enjoyable to eat, whereas coyote's edible. It's not that great of a meat to eat as far as the taste goes or palatability, but you can't eat it in a survival scenario, which we'll talk about down the road here. So fur was a reason to trap. Nowadays, the fur market bottomed out. Not much money in fur anymore. Almost not worth the time of skinning the animals and putting up the fur to sell the fur, unless you got a heck of a lot of it and you're willing to take less money for your fur. However, you can tan the furs. And if you tan the furs, you can sell them for pretty good money for people who are looking for pelts and things like that for interior decor, rustic cabins, things like that. You can make a little money off fur that way. So while that used to be a reason to trap, it's a much lower reason now on the totem pole of why you would trap animals. Zon. I got the cat out here banging into the tripod. Now we're not cooking. He wants to make a presence anyway. All right. Management. We talked about that early on. Managing your property or managing a property is a reason to trap. Whether it be an overpopulation of coyotes, an overpopulation of bobcats, an overpopulation of egg eaters like possums and raccoons, those are all reasons to those are all reasons to trap your land to create a more managed area and bring certain species back that have declined in the area. Nuisance. Nuisance trapping is something that is age old, but it's relatively new for people to make a living at. There are people that make a living doing nuisance trapping. And nuisance trapping can be anything from, I've got a fox getting in my hen house in a rural area to I have, raccoons tearing up my trash every single night to I have a beaver who's dammed up a pond or dammed up an area that runs into my pond on my homestead, and now my pond is pretty much nothing. Or they've dammed up my pond and now it's overflowing into my yard. Same thing with muskrat. Damaged by eating the trees from from beaver and muskrat. Damage to the landscape that those animals cause. Those are all reasons for nuisance trapping. And that's just to get the animals out of the area and keep them from causing damage to personal property. Survival was the last one on the list. And again, this is, economy crash. I live out in the middle of the woods and I don't have any money. Whatever the case may be, survival means I'm living off the landscape every single day for the most part. And that's where trapping comes into play of I'm going to trap anything I can catch because I'm going to eat whatever I can get and I'm going to hunt, supplement that. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about survival trapping. So again, 5 trapping intentions: food supplementation, fur, management, nuisance trapping, and survival trapping. All right, so let's first talk about types of traps. Then we'll get into looking at each one of those, the anatomy of those traps. And we'll talk about why you should use certain traps at certain locations and why you may choose one trap over another for certain target species. The first one is a snare. A snare, pretty much everybody knows what that is. It's a wire cable noose that when the animal goes through the noose, it tightens around their neck, hopefully, sometimes around their body, depending on how well you've set your snare as far as head height go, or head size and foot height go. But we'll talk about that when we talk about setting snares. But they should catch the animal around the neck, and they should be a killing type trap. The animal should be dead when you arrive on scene. A body grip trap is also a killing trap, also known as a conibear. It's an X trap that snaps shut, and they have numbers like 110, 160, 220, 330, and basically that's the pounds of pressure per square inch that trap exerts when it closes. So a 330 is something that you would use for like a beaver. A 110 or a 160 is something you would use for something smaller on a log crossing, like a mink or something like that. A 220 is something you'd use for more like a possum or a coon. We'll talk about that as we go. But body grip traps are killing type traps. They instantaneously pretty much kill the animal. So they're good ethical traps to use, but they're also indiscriminate killers. In other words, anything that puts their head through that trap or tries to walk through that box is going to get killed as long as they can get their head in the trap. So a 220 will kill a dog. So you have to be careful where you put those traps. You have to pay attention to the laws in your area, because in Ohio, a trap that is a 220 or larger has to at least be touching water, and a 330 has to be completely submerged underwater. And the reasons for that are domestic animals. Paw encapsulation traps, and these are what most people call coon cuffs. They're a tube with basically a snap bar that's spring loaded in there, like a small handcuff. We'll talk about them in a minute. And basically when the animal puts his hand in there to manipulate or pull food out, he pulls on the trigger and it snaps around his wrist and encapsulates his paw inside the trap. You're not going to catch dogs in that. That's why they call them dog-proof traps. But any animal that can put his hand inside that trap, coons, possums, skunks, those type things, you're going to catch in those type traps depending on how you bait them. Footholds. Footholds are the traps that a lot of people are used to seeing pictures of. Double long spring, single long spring, coil spring, all different types of foothold traps that we'll talk about as we go. And then, of course, live traps, the cages, that basically the animal goes in, steps on a pan to get to the food, the door slams shut behind him, he's live in the cage. Live traps are very humane in that you can take the animal somewhere else and release him. They're also good if you are planning to eat the animal, but you don't want to eat them or process them right then and there, because back to that Pathfinder mentality, live food never spoils. So you can feed them and water them if you needed to for a day or two before you decide you're going to butcher them out. So these are the 5 types of traps. We'll talk about them one at a time. All right, guys, appreciate you joining me out here today for part 2 in our trapping series, talking a little bit about intentions of trapping and types of traps we'll be using. The next video, we're going to go over each one of those traps individually, talk about them and show how they operate. And then we're going to go into tools, what tools we need to do different types of sets, why some are better than others, and what minimum tools you need. And then we'll go into setting some traps, hopefully, guys. So stay with me. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business, all our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can, guys. Thanks.